So it's kind of a weird title, you know, and I want us to talk about the definition of some of the words eventually. But the idea is that, you know, nurturing is defined. I'm trying to make sure I'm on the right page in my notes because I had 2 different pages here. Give me a minute. Yeah, it is to nourish or to support or to feed, if you're thinking about it that way. And let me flip over here to make sure I'm not forgetting this part. Or to fatten. So it has this idea of just making something grow, right? You get the idea? That's what nurturing is, to make it grow. And then the word peace just really means to be complete or whole. You know, it might not be the definition that you hear a lot. A lot of times we'll hear peace, you know, referring to something being calm, but basically it's the idea of being calm because you have a complete mindset, or you know, you understand things. You can be calm and have peace because you're complete, if that makes sense, or to be sound. And so the idea about nurturing, bringing peace to your family is just the idea that when we nourish and feed, not even just physically, but, and we're going to talk about this, spiritually and mentally and emotionally, when we feed our families, that helps them be strong and whole and sound. And of course that's what we all want. We all know this is necessary. I've have some pretty, I hate, you know, in one way I hate starting lessons with scary statistics, but sometimes there's benefit to that because it proves the point. So just bear with me for a little bit, and then I promise that it gets brighter after this. But, and these are, I don't have the exact, some of these I don't have the source on. These were statistics that I had located here and there. And so some of them I have the actual website that I got them off. But these are all just from, you know, Googling pretty trusted sources. But 30% of all internet traffic goes to pornographic websites. Isn't that sad? 30%, 1 in 3 websites are pornographic. 47% of all high school students have had sexual relations. So that's very close to half. And it might be different now. This, I think actually that one I found a couple of years ago. So in the next hour, 1,439 teens will attempt suicide.
Say that one again.
1,439 teens will attempt suicide in the next hour. In the next hour, 2,795 teenage girls will become pregnant. And 15,006 teens will use drugs for the first time in the next hour. 3,506 teens will run away in the next hour, and 2 teens will be murdered in the next hour. You read statistics like that, and it just really, really scares you. And going on, divorce rates among those 55 to 64 has quadrupled over the past 3 decades. You know, we kind of like to think if, you know, marriages that lasted that long, you know, what would happen, but 55 to 64, it's quadrupled their divorce rates. 40 to 50% of marriages end in divorce. I do have that one written down. I know it's not very appropriate to give statistics without the source, so I do apologize. I didn't realize I had not written all that down. But Psychology Today, 40 to 50% of marriages end in divorce. That's a statistic that's been pretty common for several years now, actually, about 50%. I've heard that from multiple sources. And more than 4 in 10, or about 43%, say that pornography is acceptable. That's a Gallup poll from 2018. And then 70% of 15 to 17-year-old internet users accidentally view pornography very or somewhat often. And that's from a site that's called enoughisenough.org. And we all know the nagging statistics about anxiety and depression, 25% of children between 13 and 18 are affected by an anxiety disorder. 18.5%, that's approximately 1 in 5, experience mental illness in a given year. And that's from the National Alliance on Mental Illness. And these are children, 13 to 18, so basically they're teenagers. So, I don't know, why start a lesson like that we want to be built up here, right? We want tools for our families and how to be better, wives and mothers and just have stronger families. But that's kind of where it starts. And it might seem counterintuitive and it's not really meant to scare us, but it also helps us kind of know what we're dealing with. Because I think one of the biggest mistakes we can make as a parent, and I'm talking to myself, if you think, any lesson I'm teaching is stepping on toes, just know that mine are already very sore after I study and think about all these things for myself. But when we know what we're up against, I would like to think it would make us just be more determined to protect our families, to make them stronger. And we can't take all of the bad out of the world. Last night I mentioned that even Jesus himself said that in the world you have tribulation, but Jesus has overcome the world, and he's given us his word. He's given us the scriptures we need to help, and he's given us guidance. And there are so many things we can do to help our families be strong and to help them grow stronger and to nurture. And that's what women do best. We're nurturers. I mean, that's a pretty common trait of most women, is that we're really good at nurturing. We love to take care of things and people. And so when we can do what we can do and we're helping our families, that does bring us peace, because we know we've done what we can do. We may not succeed in the end. We may have, things not turn out the way we would want them to, but knowing that all the years and as much as you've tried, that can bring some peace to you. As you go through life with a family, and even after your children are growing up, there's still so much nurturing to do with your grown children and with your adult children, or with your grandchildren. And so there's still so much we can do to think about what it means to actually nurture. And so that's what we're going to focus on today. Let me try, and I moved my pencil. Oh no. Notebook. Okay, there we go. All right, so we're going to talk about three or four people or groups of people that we should be nurturing and with the idea that it helps our family, it helps our children in one way or the other. It helps our whole family, our husband, our children separately and individually, and so we're going to be talking about how all of that will help build our families up. So, and then I have a couple of ideas that I want at the end. We're going to be the next lesson. The next lesson is going to be about balancing all of this. So I told you these kind of build on each other, because I'm going to give you lots of things to think about, and instead of feeling overwhelmed and defeated, I want you to just keep the interest there, and then hopefully in the last lesson we'll talk about some ways to help us balance all of this and do the best we can do. So, last night I mentioned that the first point is nurturing our husbands. That's the first person we should be nurturing. And even though that this is technically a parenting seminar, your relationship with your husband, if you're married, is key to a healthy family. I'm not saying you can't do a good job at parenting. I said that last night because I don't want to be misunderstood. But if you are married, that relationship is important to the well-being of your family. So it's worth us nurturing. So in what ways can we do that? Already, each one of these people or groups, I'm going to talk about how we nurture them physically, and then how we nurture them spiritually and emotionally and mentally, kind of lumped in together there. So how do we nurture our husbands physically? I mean, some of it's pretty standard. Sometimes we think, well, we just feed them. Well, we do, physically taking care of him is important. Making sure that he has the things that he needs and wants in a physical way, that he's taken care of will help him just, be more secure in the relationship. And we should be mindful of the fact that God, our husbands have a God-given role. They're the heads of our house. Very often they're leaders in the church. And we don't need to look at, I think we're in this point in our culture to where it almost seems for a lot of women like, well, he's a grown man. He can do that for himself. He's not a baby. And it's really not about that. It's really about us supporting him while he supports and does his role as far as leading the home. And it helps him do better at that, actually. And so just a few weeks ago, at the end of the summer, we went on a family vacation, took our kids to Washington, D.C., and on the way back, we went out of our way on the way back to visit Colonial Williamsburg. And I don't know if you've ever been there, but we were there, and Martha Washington came out to do a little performance, so she was a young Martha, and she really did a great job. But she basically is role playing what it was like she had this letter brought in to, she was trying to gather funds for, I can't remember the name of the group that she was a part of, but it was raising money for the war effort, the Revolution War. And she mentioned that she had decided to go, or how it felt when George Washington wanted her to come and stay with him in their winter encampment, I think at Valley Forge, and how she didn't really want to go because she didn't want to leave her home. She didn't know what she could possibly do there. And so she went through this spiel about how she was feeling about it, and that she finally went. I think he maybe insisted, she finally went. She took the things with her and the caravan that was with her and all of that went with her there. And one thing she said that I just thought, this is so important, and she just expressed it. I won't ever be able to say it the way she said it, but she said, I noticed when I got there how sad things were. And, soldiers were not really being taken care of very well, and that, that's one reason she was trying to raise funds, for their uniforms and for their just anything, food, and to be able to make sure they had the shoes and everything they needed. But she made a statement about, she quickly learned that one of her best jobs there, that, here's her husband who is trying to make this ragtag group of soldiers look impressive to the French government, the French army, because they had been around for a while, they were actually helping us through the Revolutionary War. And she said that, her husband's trying to impress these people, and he wants the army to look as good as it can, and they need funds for that. And so then they also have dinners. People come in so they can, do all their war planning and talk and do all the things that officers do. And so her role really was just being a hostess. And then she said, I found my place, that he was making the army look good, but it was my job to make him look good. And so she just took this role of making sure the dinners were nice, making sure things were impressive, so that her husband looked. And I thought, really, that's a biblical idea. Because, if you look in Proverbs chapter 31, when we go to that, at the very end of the chapter, or at some part in here, it talks about how her husband had sat in the gates and he was respected. And part of why her husband in Proverbs 31 was respected is because she made him look good. And as wives and mothers, we can take that role for our families too, and there's no shame in that. There's no shame in us making our families look good, and specifically for our point here, making our husbands look good in a physical way. And that's not superficial. That helps him be the influence he should be. It helps him in living his life with his job and in the church and whatever places we can, he might go. And so it's good for us to do those things at home. So it might even mean, you keep a good home, you keep order in your home so that he looks good and that benefits your whole family in the long run. So it's playing your particular role doing it well, that benefits your entire family. And I think that's something we should be thinking about a lot more, because the world will tell us that none of that's really important, but I believe it is important, and I believe it's important for the well-being of your family. So a lot of this goes along with, clothes and homes, just being a source of pride, and that's part of the physical nurturing. And also, I told you we would talk about this last night too, but part of the physical nurturing for your husband is maintaining and not neglecting your sex life with him. And I know for any age, I don't know like what ages and what relationships we have out here, but it's still worth us teaching, because women, we ought to be teaching all of our younger women as they get married and even through marriage, that is a terrible thing to do for your relationship and for your family in the long run, is neglecting your sex life. Sometimes, we feel like, well, it's okay, and I'll mention this in the next lesson too, about balancing all of that, but we don't want to neglect that, and you could read and read and read about that. You could read marriage books about why that's so important, and then how that's one of the most important needs he has physically. And so when we are nurturing him, that's part of it. That's part of it. I'm gonna pause there and talk a lot more about how we balance all of that later, because I think that fits in better with that lesson, but I did want to mention it with here. And so that's nurturing him physically, but we also should be nurturing him spiritually. We should be praying for our husbands, praying for his strength and his courage to be a good father and husband. We should let him lead. That's actually nurturing him spiritually. When as women, as wives, when we make that more difficult because we put up a fight about who's in charge and I want this, and we're actually hurting him spiritually, because he's been given that role by God. He just didn't create this. I know that feminists would like us to believe that that's just a construct of just, the world, that men, being just, taking over. But that's a God-given. They're told by God to be the head, that they're the head of their family, that the husband is the head of the wife. And if we're nurturing him spiritually, we shouldn't be making that job any harder. And we need to remember, like I mentioned last night, that submission isn't bad. We mentioned Jesus' example. We need to always remember that. When it's hard, go read Philippians chapter 2. When it's hard, when you are just so angry about not feeling like you have that control, that, maybe sometimes we just know we're right about something. I mean, I've been there, like, I know this is not right. I know that this is not going to work out. But just listening and reading Philippians chapter 2 sometimes will help me understand that I'm not being stepped on and I'm not being discounted by him. It's just the roles that we are playing in our family, and we should be make our family work better and not harming that. And sometimes when you're talking about nurturing spiritually, I also want to not just assume that your husband is a Christian. We can still nurture a non-Christian husband spiritually. And the Bible teaches us, about women who are married to unbelievers, how they could win them without a word. I didn't write that scripture down, but most of you have heard that, and if you know where that is, you can just yell that out, because I didn't write it down. But that was something I thought about, is that just because you're married and you still need to nurture him spiritually, even though he may not even realize he needs it, even though he doesn't want, and he's not a Christian. And there's different ways you can do this. It actually just is meeting him where he is. That's the way we help anyone, really. If he doesn't know much about the Bible, one way you're nurturing him is just even by teaching your own children, constantly telling them. He's hearing some of that. He can hear those Bible lessons, those simple ones. That helps him. If he's, he knows more about the Bible than Noah built the ark, then maybe you step it up, and maybe your own Bible studies. It's not that you're sitting down teaching him with your Bible open like a teacher, but you're maybe mentioning something that meant something to you in a Bible study. it's just a natural, maybe more of a natural conversation. That's what our Christian life should be anyway, that you're studying, your studies help you, and so you're able to use that to help him when it's gonna happen, that maybe there's problems in his life, and he's watching, and he, it may not ever come to anything, and you can't control that, but you could do your part by nurturing him spiritually, even if he's not a Christian, by discussing what you've learned, and even if he's not coming to church with you, there's still some benefit to you just being a spiritually minded Christian woman, and he'll see that. And then we also nurture our husbands emotionally, and we do that, I think, best by respecting him. That's a spiritual thing for us, but for him, that's an emotional thing. I mean, we have a spiritual obligation to do that because we're commanded in Ephesians chapter 5 to respect our husbands. But for him, that means something. I don't know if you're familiar with the book. It's called Love and Respect. Have anybody heard of that book? It's an awesome marriage book. And the main Everson Eggerichs wrote that book. So if you search it, it'll pop up and you'll see Love and Respect. It's a pretty popular marriage book. He's not a New Testament Christian, but the main idea of the book is that men and women are different. And if you happen to look at Ephesians chapter 5, we're not going to stay there very long, but he bases this whole book on that section of scripture, to where that even though we're supposed to love our husbands, we command it, Titus 2 says older women should teach younger women to love their husbands. But in Ephesians chapter 5, there's like two different things going on here. And I'm going to find right here, that he's commanded to love his wife, that the husbands love your wives in verse 25 there, as Christ loved the church. But in this section, the woman isn't really commanded to love her husband. She's commanded to respect him. And he's not really in this scripture saying to respect your wife. No, just saying, oh, that sounds really bad. But to love her. And really, Dr. Eggerichs here, this book is the idea that overall, what means the most, and this is generally speaking, what means the most to a woman in this relationship is that love. She wants to feel loved, that someone's putting her needs above, so that's why it's important for a husband to love his wife, because the wife needs that. That's what's making her tick, so to speak, more. But for the husband, that he needs that respect, maybe a little bit more than he needs that love. And it's just about the differences between men and women. Very general statements here. But overall, that he said he had found in his marriage counseling and all that was key to understanding how men and women and husbands and wives react to one another. And he said, so the problem we get in, and so it was convicting, I'm just telling you, when I read the book. The problem we get in is that we think as a society that you don't have to earn love, right? We don't have to earn love. You love someone because you should love them, and that's even in the agape love of just self-sacrificing love for anyone, for any human, but you shouldn't have to earn that. But he said so many times in a marriage, a wife will convince herself that her husband has to earn that respect. And he frankly says that's just nowhere in Scripture. That's something we've made up. The reason it was convicting, he said, how would you feel if, because this chapter was written, to more specifically to wives, how would you feel if you wanted to talk to your husband about him showing you more love? And he said, well, you have to earn that. I mean, look what you do over here and do this and do that. And so I will love you, but I want you to earn that love. But sometimes if we don't come out and say it, that's what we're saying to them. And sometimes wives might come out and say that when they're having issues in their marriage. Well, he needs to earn my respect if he'd get up off the couch and mow the yard, or if he would put his dirty clothes like I've asked him for umpteen times, and I would respect him if he was acting worthy of that. And when he put that up together, like how we would feel about thinking we have to earn love, he said, how awful. And he said, that's not what it's about, because respect is as far as your husband goes, the respect is that that's what you were commanded to do because of who he is to you. He's your husband. It doesn't matter what kind of husband, and I'm not talking about, ignoring sin, and I'm not talking about letting him physically abuse and emotionally. I'm not talking about that, but I'm just talking about in the day-to-day living that we should know that he doesn't have to be perfect for us to respect him. We should respect him because of who he is and who he is to your children. He's their father, and how we react to them, and that's actually nurturing him spiritually or mentally and emotionally. It helps him thrive. I mean, sometimes he needs that so he can actually be built up and do what he should be doing. So, if there's issues like that in your marriage, maybe that's something to do. You put your thoughts secondary, like we're commanded to do anyway, and give him what he needs and build him up. And just see if that makes a difference in his life, and how he, if you're letting him lead and you are talking to him respectfully, it's very possible that is going to become his personality more than if we're assuming he doesn't know how, or that, we pick at every little thing he's doing wrong. And it's hard, it's really hard, because I've been there to where but it's something we should all be working toward. And so now we'll shift to this idea of nurturing our children. In the same ways we nurture our children, physically, spiritually. So let's talk about how we physically nurture our children. And it's very similar for them. I think children need order. They need order and structure. And that's part of what we do as wives and as their mother, is we ensure that they have structure and order. And, don't come to my house. If you came to my house, I'm not talking about keeping a spotless house, because you would probably just want to walk right back out the door if you saw my house right now. Although Adam did vacuum for me, because I was losing my mind yesterday. We had our co-op to go to, our homeschool co-op, and I had 0 time, and his family is his sister's coming in over the weekend, and I'm like, what if they want to come over here on Labor Day? Everything's a mess. And so I got home and he had vacuumed and dusted downstairs. So I thought that was so sweet. But still, we should strive to keep an orderly house. It's better for everybody than to just be completely, I don't know if when things are not in order and when things are just piles and piles, I just feel more stressed. I can't find things, everybody's running around, I feel guilty, and it's just so much better if I just make that a priority. And kids need to be taught to do that themselves. They need your training and your teaching to say, put that, like I mentioned already, those dirty dishes, you can put those in the dishwasher. Don't just put those on the counter and expect that somebody else is going to stick them in there. Teach them things like that. And that's good for them to know that the world does not revolve around their little 15-year-old self. That they're able to do things for themselves, and they're able to do things for other people. So we should teach them that. And it does bring a sense of security, that kids need to feel the sense of home. They need to know what that feels like in a comforting way, not in a way that's chaotic and stressful, and our houses are just where we drop everything and come home to sleep before we go back out and do everything. And it's easy to get into that lifestyle, and all of a sudden you wake up and you think, what kind of life am I living? And we can regain that sense of home in our culture, and I think we ought to. We need to make that a priority. And so that's actually physically nurturing our children when we do that. It helps them grow and feel safe and secure. And also, we also feed our children literally and physically. We need to do that. But I wanted to spend a little bit of time here talking about the importance of eating as a family. We need to carve that time out, even though it might be hard with schedules. I have a friend who I think is just so good at this. She has 4 children. One of them is autistic and one's in college. But all the years I've known her, it always is impressive to me that I feel like she makes that family dinner a priority. She's at least going to insist for her part, that at least, I can't remember what she told me one day, like days of the week, she considers the children's schedules because they're older, but then she puts her foot down about being home at this time and we're gonna sit down and eat together. And she is a great cook and all of that, but I thought that is really how it ought to be. You know, we need to just hold the line when it comes to our families having that time. Because if we don't, they won't. Hold the line and say, this is important. And it's not just, oh, it's quaint and that's, you know, good memories. It's healthy for them. I've got on the Family Dinner Project, it's a website here, and I honestly know that I need new glasses because I'm having trouble reading that. But I'm going to try my best to read the benefits of ages 1 to 5 is that conversation. It's even conversation around a dinner table for children. And I'm an educator by trade, so to speak. It's what I've done for years. It's what I went to school to do. And I love reading. I think it's so important, but this blew me away that this study says that conversation at the dinner table is even better than reading to children in boosting their vocabulary and helping them to read. I was like, do what? Because I'm just like, oh, you should just read to your kids, make that, you know, bedtime story, just read, helps them. It's better for them building their vocabularies. Why would that be? It makes perfect sense. You're sitting there in a real life situation discussing things with each other. I think it's important for you, you know, for mom and dad to kind of lead the discussion, you know, not sit around talking about Paw Patrol or whatever is the, now, what is it, Bluey now? I don't know, I'm out of that game already, but anyway, talk about things. Let them hear some adult conversations that, you know, as they grow. And I think that's so important. And it's also how you listen. Adam said, well, their family didn't do family devos, and he thought but one thing I've heard his mom say is that was their family time. They talked around the table, and she said that was kind of really more like what we did in place of those family Bible time devos. They talked about school. They had these discussions, you know, as the kids grew about spiritual things and how we should treat others and using real life situations, and it was invaluable. And so we can do that. There's so many benefits here, I really, truly. But there's a lower risk of teen pregnancy. Those who have experienced the consistency of family dinners, there's higher self-esteem, better academic performance, lower risk of substance abuse, lower risk of depression, and then some obvious health benefits to that about, you know, overeating and things like that, because, you know, you're doing this as a group and not just mindlessly sitting in front of a TV eating. And so I won't take the time to read that because I really can't. This is embarrassing. But anyway, and we need to move on anyway. So make that a priority. Make it a priority. And we should be nurturing our children spiritually. They need healthy doses of biblical teaching. And you start where you are with your children. Some of you may have little children, and you are in the prime area to start things without it being weird. If you wait till they're 10, 11, 15 years old, it's going to be weird, more weird. You still need to do it, but it's going to be more weird to say, guess what? We've not done a good job about this, and we're going to start having more spiritual discussions in our family. We're going to read this book together, and, you know, it might be a little weird if they're older, but when they're younger, you know, it's so simple. You just maybe get a Bible story book. The Eager Myers Bible story book is one of the best. It's old. It stood the test of time. There's little questions at the end of the chapters, or at the, you know, I guess there would be chapters, but it's just a little chronological book through the Bible, and perfect for little children. And just reading those every day and having your kids learn more about the Bible and talking about it as they grow and as they learn. That's an awesome. If your kids are older and this is something that you know, like this is, you know, kind of a not on my watch kind of deal, like you know that this is something you haven't done so great at, but your kids are older, you probably don't want to be reading them a Bible storybook. But there are two books that I think would be perfect for this. And one is called 4,000 Years in 13 Weeks, and it's written by Sue Crabtree. She's a member of the church. And another one that's newer, actually, is 27 books in 13 weeks. And what those two books are is a survey. The 4,000 years and 13 weeks is about the Old Testament. In 13 weeks, it's a survey of what the sections, what the books of the law are about, what the books of history are about, and there's some little projects in there, so it's perfect to tweak to certain ages. Like you could, there might be like something about a map, so you could make it really nice. You could make it just a general thing, just so we know about the Bible. There's questions and things to answer, so it could be perfect just guide for you and your family as you maybe together say, let's learn more about the Bible. It's important, and I think it's okay to make that change abruptly, even when you need to. And then, because it's important for them to see that they feel comfortable with the Bible, that they understand. Obviously, they need to know what God says. That's what they're going to be judged by on the day of judgment. They need to know what's in that book. So whatever you can do. And they're going to learn lots after, but they still need to be learning as they're younger also. And I won't spend much time on this, we talked about it last night, but you really need to make sure your kids are learning about Christian evidences, or you might call it apologetics. They have to be learning this. If they don't, I don't think it's too far and too dramatic for me to say. I'm afraid that if we don't teach our kids that by the time they're young adults, they're going to have some serious questioning of their faith that they might not return from. They need to know that there is reason to believe the Bible, that there's a reason to believe in God. It's not just, sometimes we're so comfortable with the little ooey gooey words like faith, and I just believe it because no, we need to be really giving them the evidence for God. And there's so many, I mentioned apologeticspress.com is where you should go if you don't know of anything else, because you could read everything and see all the books for teens, all the books for adults, and just there's articles. All of their articles are archived on there. They've written publications for years about any kind of scientific thing. If you got a sciencey kid, especially if they're sciencey, they need to be reading about apologetics. So do that and have. Why am I having my pencil like this all the time? I need to put that thing down. I keep thinking of it. But so we should be doing that. We should be nurturing them mentally and emotionally as well. And here I just want to park for a minute and say phones have to be monitored in our day and time. They just have to be. And even with the monitoring, you're going to have things come up that like, what in the world were you thinking kind of things. Even with monitoring, I will say that we should I think for our kids who are, if they are teenagers, and I know that you need to work with them as they get older. Eventually they will leave your house, and you're not going to have them give you their phone as adults or whatever, but we need to be training them how to use their phones. But it is still acceptable for you to say, at 9 o'clock, that phone is in my room, and it can charge overnight in my room. Because you do not want your kid up half the night texting, and you don't want who knows who texting them. We don't need to just assume it's their little silly friend talking about silly things. Well, for one, physically, that's not healthy. They need sleep. And the other one is that's where problems can arise, where while you're sleeping, they're being conditioned. They're being, even going so far as being groomed to be able to have, these thoughts in their head, and there's just no good reason for them to have their phones with them at night or their computers. So just make the rule. Just start and say, from now on, this is going to be in our room. We have a place you could do a power charge or a power strip or something. Bring them in here, and we will keep them here and tell them why. That this is a safety for you, it's safety for our family, and this is our rule. And I think even doing that can cut a lot of that out. But there's so many. We do I can't even say this word, Custodio app on our phones, and it monitors like who they're texting, and monitors their like if they download an app, it monitors if they go to you can set settings on it, like what websites are alerting to you, and so it's all like where you can tailor it to what you want, but it's been really good at me feeling like at least somewhat I know what they're doing. And we can talk about how it is not invasion of privacy, but when we were growing up, I mean, somebody called my house. Who answered that phone usually? It was probably my mom. She knew who was calling me. She knew how long I was on that phone, because if she needed the phone or my dad needed the phone, guess what? They were like, get off the phone. And they knew, they had a sense of, and so that's why it's so important now. Like the phones we have with cell phones is so private, and that's where the trouble comes. But it's okay to say, you don't have that much privacy, and put down those rules and those safety measures, and I think you'll be happier, they'll be better off. Okay. And they also need the stream of all that constant. We wonder, how can a young woman who's been to church all her life, I think I said this last night, how do they come to finally announcing to their family that they think XYZ is okay? Maybe they think, homosexuality is okay. Maybe they think abortion, maybe they just soften on it. And maybe they just don't see, they think you're too hard on it. And how do they come to that? It's really usually not from you or from the church. I mean, I guess some teachers may be teaching them that at church, I don't know. But I'm just saying that you, as a mom, need to be having your eyes on the information that keeps coming to them all day long through these feeds that they have. And, just, you can control that. It may seem mean and, there are fights and they don't understand, but we should be doing it anyway. Okay, we could talk, I wanted us to just mainly talk about this idea of nurturing and building up our families. I think and this is just the beginning. We should be nurturing our church family too, but this is a parenting seminar, but things like that are still good for your kids. You nurture your church family in all of these same ways. Let them see you cooking and taking physical care of someone, and let them see you counseling someone spiritually. They need to see that that's what you do as a Christian, and then they learn how to do that. And it's not so weird for them. They're not feeling like they're caught off guard. And they should see that us doing that out in the community in ways that are appropriate. They should see us trying to teach people about God. They should see us caring about our neighbors down the street who maybe just lost their husband or maybe lost a child or something like that. And all of these things at the end of the day build that strong family unit, because you focused on these important things and you have given them that food, whether it's physical or spiritual or emotional, that they need to thrive. And then they're just so much better off because of it. And it takes time. It takes time. And so the next lesson, actually, when we start that, is going to be about balancing all of that, because it's hard to fit things in. So we'll stop here in about 15 minutes. I think they told me about 45 minutes. So.